Alrighty, good morning, everybody. It is Tuesday, March 18th of 2025. We have a pretty good lesson to look at here for yesterday. If you guys were here for the pre-market, or if you were watched the review yesterday where we talked about, or maybe the lesson where we talked about trying to narrow down your trades and finding signals on our 3-minute time frame to narrow down areas in the chart to trade. So basically, when the market is testing into one of our roadmap levels, if we get a confluence between a test of a level with a divergence on the 3-minute time frame, and then a similar pattern on the 512, it can sometimes become the best trade of the day, right? You sometimes will capture the major swing high for the morning, or for the day, or the major swing low for the day. And so yesterday, after we talked about waiting for the market to come into a major area of resistance, to the upside in this case, we talked about looking for that 3-minute signal. We had some really good trade setups within the first minutes of the open here. So this is looking at this on the 512. This is yesterday's open. They went ahead and launched right off 50% of the day before, or the week before, and came up. And the first setup really of the day, unless you bought from the 50% just before the market opened there, because you can see there was a nice 3-minute bullish divergence going on just within the first couple moments of the open. So there was kind of a buy right there. But the other thing that was really, really cool is that we talked about this level right here being in a very important area for the bulls to get through, right? Because we had all the bullish clues from the low of the week before coming all the way back down, I think, to 55.08. Again, the low of last week was our roadmap level within 2 ticks, or within a single tick. And from there, we've been expecting the market to continue to push higher. And when we came into the market yesterday in the pre-market, even I believe in our lesson about the 3-minute signals, we talked about 56.72.5 being a very important level that we wanted to see the bulls get through in order to have more faith in that larger continuation to the upside. So when we came in yesterday morning and the market was kind of rallying all the way up to 56.72.5, we got our first setup here, right? And so they came up into it, and as the market was testing into that 56.72.5 level, let's bring the 3-minute in as well. What was the 3-minute showing us? It was showing a very clear, you see that push to this lower low on the RVI. You see the push, obviously, to a much higher high on price. And we were testing the very level I warned you was very important resistance there for the bulls to get through. On the 512 here, if we're watching this in real time, you can see all the divergence forming as we're getting close to that level here, right? We keep getting lower and lower highs on RVI, higher and higher highs on price. And so when I saw that setup, it was very fresh. Like we had literally just talked less than 10 minutes ago, earlier, about seeing a 3-minute signal lining up with a major roadmap level. In this case, the very level I warned you about in the pre-market. And then we get the 512 bearish signal as well. So I got a couple trades off from that area. First one came all the way back, but still got a pretty awesome trade. Look, this is now shorting 56.72.5. I think I might have gotten in at 72 there. It still brought me all the way to 52 for nearly a 20-point sell-off, right? I did take profit along the way. So I didn't actually get a 20-pointer eventually. It missed it by like maybe a point or two, but got a whole bunch off on the way. And then right here, when they came back to the very same level with more divergence forming, the 3-minute continued to show the same pattern. So we still had all the divergence on the 3-minute on that second test there. And you can see here is the second test on the 512 with the divergence. And then when I saw this push to this slightly lower low, this was flat or technically a tick or two higher, I went ahead and entered again, right? Because I knew I was going to be wrong up above 74. I got in just at around 71.5 and got another sell-off, took profit along the way, taking my final position off at the 200 and got some really good trades. So this is how we nailed the high of the morning. It came back a third time and I had already made pretty good money and I didn't want to play with the level for the third time. Now it did work out for, I think, a slightly deeper pullback there, and they came right to the VWAP, and then that was it for that move. So there were 3 opportunities, like I said, by the third test, especially noticing that they came back to defend the 200 and come back to that area, even though, look at that beautiful pattern, push to a slightly higher high, push to a slightly lower high in RVI, testing the level to the tick again. Even though that was a good setup, I, at that point, was done with it. I figured first, second knock, third knock, more than likely they'll get through. But again, we had the divergence the whole time. 3-minute had a divergence. Maybe not on the third test there necessarily, but it was still below the swing high where we had the divergence from the second test. So we had never gotten through that area, and then it went. So you can see that by the third test there, especially not seeing a very clear bearish divergence, just, other than the 512, just made me stay out. And again, after this level's been tested a couple times, you've already kind of went to the well how many times, and typically when you try to keep hitting it, that's when you give your money back, right? So I was good enough with those 2 tests, made plenty of money, and then we get the pullback and the bounce off the VWAP. So this is just another example within 10 or 15 minutes of telling you guys yesterday that this level was important, and this setup of the 3-minute divergence as we're testing a level, it all came to fruition there right out of the open, and you pretty much could have been done for the day in the first 15, 20 minutes, right? So that's how we nailed the morning high, and that's how I made some money on the pullback. Now, overall, our bias were for higher highs. But here's the thing. We knew that this level right here was the key thing for the bulls to get through. So that is our expected major resistance. And then eventually, by the end of the day, they break through and we get to higher high, right? So remember, the market doesn't move in straight lines very often. Sometimes it does, but that's more the exception than the rule. So even though we have a bias, and I think I've done a couple kind of lessons on previous days about this, just because you're bullish doesn't mean you can't make money on a pullback, and then just because you're bearish doesn't mean you can't make money on a bounce, right? So this is an example of having a bullish bias, expecting the bulls to push higher, expecting resistance from a level, seeing the signal line up there, and trying for the pullback, right? So that was probably one of the better trades you could have taken yesterday. Now, if you were trying to play in the direction of I would just say kind of the basic bias. Remember, bias is not something that you need to live by because it's going to change every time the market gives you new information. But if you wanted to go in the direction of the basic base bias that we did have, which was for the bulls, you did get the textbook pullback right to VWAP here for the bounce. And then that was it. We pushed all the way up to new highs and then got that little pullback at the end of the day. So there was a long opportunity when they came into the VWAP here and found support. So what did the charts look like when they were pulling back into VWAP here, especially on that first tag? We had this extreme push in RVI all the way back into the 20. You could argue also that was divergence, but it's, you could say, hey, here's the last major swing on the RVI, And now here we are, and we're higher compared to that previous swing, but we're lower on price. And you could argue that. Not necessarily what I like going back through so many swings. But the 3-minute, as that was happening, was definitely showing some pretty clear divergence. And really, the sexiest part of the setup here on the 3-minute, you can take a look here, is, first of all, you get that divergence compared to this swing here, right? So this is a little bit more local from a 3-minute perspective. You get a very clear divergence going on. We're pushing to lower lows on RVI. We're obviously higher on price. Now, the real sexy part of this setup was this second pullback. So we bounce, we come back to test the VWAP, and you can see it here on the 512 chart. This is kind of pretending like we're looking at this live, and you see it hold here, and you see this happen on the 3-minute time frame. And it took, again, 3, 6, 9, maybe a little over 10 minutes for it to finally go, because you can see here it held finally, and again, this is like 20 minutes of time frame, and then we get the push. So as it's down here for 10, 15 minutes, what you should have noticed here is on this next swing low, you now get that beautiful divergence pattern, right? We're obviously higher compared to the major swing low here. The RVI is much lower. So that right there would have clued me in. The first test, like I said, you could argue divergence from this previous swing. But when you get that local setup compared to the two local swings, that's what I like, the most, right? And from there, you can see we then take off from there. So you did have all the bullish clues from these lows. Would have been even sexier if that swing, that little kiss of VWAP there, gave another. But you did have this 3-minute pattern, and then we get the breakout. Now, what we needed to see here was a break at least through 56.62 half. And you can see, as this market was pulling back yesterday, fading the back end of 56.62 half gave you some pretty sweet setups, right? You got the first test here with bearish divergence. Again, zooming in to look at the pattern. Beautiful push into this slightly higher high, slightly lower high on the RVI. And that's the first pullback right from the level to the tick, right? So there was a good setup there, and there was a good second test with an even sexier divergence off that swing. So there was some good short opportunities. But again, looking at this from the perspective of this bullish pattern from VWAP, again, this is not just a bullish setup in the middle of the chart somewhere. This is right off VWAP. We know there's edge because very often we see price come right to VWAP, and that becomes the next support or a major resistance when we get below it. So, and you can even see that here last night, or just in the last couple minutes, we get down through VWAP. It becomes a major resistance spot and sometimes rotates off of it to the tick, right? So that's what ended up happening yesterday. They come back down to it, give it that kiss to the tick, and then we get the push. So let me make the case here that until they could get through 62 and 72, there was no real breakout, right? And you can see there's the bullish pattern. We test it. We tested a second time, bearish divergence for the pullback again. And then right here, notice what we get. Big bullish 3-minute pattern right off the roadmap level. So you can see it stepping up the very levels we watch, get the double bottom with the bullish divergence on the second swing. Again, this level didn't break by very much. It was 47 to 45, so maybe 2.5 point break, and then we get the breakout. So once we get through 62, let's look at what the 512 looked like. We get through 62. You didn't get any long opportunity until we get through really the major level we need to get through, which is 72. And then you get your first long opportunity right off the fast moving average. And it should have been pretty clear. This was a pretty strong push out. we couldn't even pull back and test into the FMA the whole way through 62 and 72, right? The two major swings from the morning. And then you get this nice aggressive setup right off the FMA, big bullish divergence. And then every test of the FMA, as we aggressively push higher, gave you some great entries. So if you missed out on trying to buy around VWAP or maybe on this pullback into 47.5, again, we had all this nice bullish divergence setting up here. So if you bought the first test there, when that divergence set up there, and you had the divergence on your 512 chart, look at that. I mean, that's very clear, very, very clear as day. A little bit more aggressive because you're kind of inside of this chop here, but beautiful bullish clues, beautiful bullish potential on the 3-minute, and you're testing into a major level of support and resistance. So you got a long opportunity. If you missed that, again, you had to recognize that this market got really, really strong into the bullish side, and you had to get in on these aggressive pullbacks. Again, pulling back off of the first roadmap level to the tick for a short opportunity. And this wasn't just 2 points. It looks like it's not much movement. That was 89 all the way to 82 half for, a 6-7 point pullback. So every single level we had above us became a near perfect resistance on the way up. You can see it's so clear here. Just bam, right to it, kiss it, pull back, and there's that play off the FMA. And then we come up and make the high of the day, where we kind of peter out multiple times right off 5,700, that next roadmap level, maybe 5,700 half. Hold, get through it, hold, and pull back for the end of the day. So lots of great opportunity yesterday. And then if you wanted to look from the high of the day yesterday, if we can get back to that, you even had a very clear bearish pattern from the high of the day. The issue is we weren't testing into a major roadmap level, so I wouldn't have been acting on a trade right there. But if you see the market pulling back and getting through the first expected support level, and you see the bearish pattern, that is a bearish divergence, clear as day. You even have the bearish pattern on the 512. The first test here, second swing right there, that's all divergence. And then we get the break through the 200. There's the crossover, and then eventually the first tag of the 200 happens in the overnight session last night. So there's your setup, once again, to be short in the direction of the pullback on the first test of the 200, another textbook trade setup that we teach here. So lots of good opportunity yesterday. Again, you should have made your money within the first 20 minutes of the open, taking everything that we talked about before the market opened, applying it right in front of you, using the very level that we warned you about, and taking the setup. So that is it, my friends. Have a great day. We're going to jump up to the higher time frames now and see if they have anything new to say for this morning.